Welcome boys and girls, Questine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Creative Assembly has announced the second campaign AI beta for the game, as well as announcing siege changes. Or rather, what they've specifically said, we have a team internally starting to explore changes we think we can make to sieges and are hoping to bring you more on that in the summer. Knowing Creative Assembly, it's probably going to be mid-late summer before we even get an announcement, and then maybe by the end of the year that we'll actually get anything with regards to sieges. You have to wonder how many people are actually working on Warhammer 3 right now on improving the game, on patches. We know they have a patch team. We also know they have a DLC team. Actually, I think they have several patch teams by the looks of it, like, you know, some people talking about working on the campaign AI. I'm just basing that on the recent vlog that they did on the subject where they announced the Sinnelleos DLC. So, they talk more about the campaign AI, and they'll be launching on Thursday, 10th of April, the new campaign AI beta on Steam. To go over a couple, and announcing the changes they're bringing with it. They're also reintroducing back the Proving Grounds to test various ideal or radical solutions and test systemic changes to core gameplay systems while giving you an opportunity to try out these changes and provide feedback to them. I think this is actually very important when we're talking about sieges, because let me be as blunt as possible. I think a lot of people agree with the sentiment, the vast majority of the community, or 99% of it, agree that sieges are not good. The problem is that the solution coming from the community, be it Reddit, Discord, forums, generally speaking, they're not really solution. There are things that would make sieges annoying, but I'm going to make a whole video on that particular subject. Suffice to say that if you genuinely think that just removing wall ladders or improving wall HP, gate HP is a solution to sieges, or making them obnoxious is a solution, you're flat out wrong. That is where I stand on that. I think if you make battles obnoxious, that is not good for the game. You want to make battles interesting, and you don't want things to be inherently annoying to tackle. Especially when there is ways to abuse various things. You don't want people to be pushed down the path of abusing mechanics as opposed to playing the game naturally. I think that's my perspective. So anyway, we have Radoslav Borisov, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, principal technical designer at CA Sofia, who's working on the campaign AI. So, here are the key things that they're going to be dealing with in the second campaign AI beta. Anti-player bias, distance scaling, aggression, faction, potential. So, they go into details on the subject of anti-player bias. There exist two different measuring scales within AI, threat and strength. Every faction in game has a threat evaluation based on a variety of factors, diplomatic activity, interactions with campaign objects, region count, among others. The main purpose of the threat score is to inform the AI how powerful and influential other factions, even without them being allied or hostile. The above-mentioned threat evaluations result in two distinct scores: Global Strategic Threat Score and Individual Threat Score. Global Strategic Threat is like a leaderboard of who's the most powerful and influential, and Individual Threat Scores are individual for every faction and reflect their view. Global Strategic Threat Score is used as a baseline for these calculations, but factions take additional parameters into consideration, such as proximity, diplomatic attitude, direct aggressive actions, among others. Then we have the strength overview. Whenever the AI needs to understand how strong any force is in battle, it does a strength evaluation. Said strength evaluation takes into consideration everything the AI knows about it, unit experience, bonuses, stats, among other things. Every time a task is being evaluated, a strength evaluation is performed on the target. We know that the AI was making decisions certainly based on strength ranking. Like, you could fight a battle, you would win it. You might replenish the troops by the end of that turn, but because you were temporarily weakened, you might get a bunch of AI factions just instantly declaring war on you on the end turn before you replenish. That didn't necessarily create a great situation. Also, on the subject of strength, it's also a question of strength of forces, because what AI considers an army to be strong or weak is not necessarily what it actually is, like be it an auto-resolve or actual strength on the battlefield. So there are some issues. So in the beta, they're changing threat player actions to generate to be between 90 and 100%. Additionally, a new multiplier that changes the player strength from 100% to always be between 100% and 120% based on AI personality and campaign difficulty level. Also, the vast majority of tasks of attack, human forces, elements, variety have been removed, and the ones that were not removed have had their priority greatly reduced. Okay, fair enough. That's pretty good. So, based on what I'm reading here, they're changing the way that AI evaluates threat and strength. Though it's kind of tricky for me. So I'm guessing the AI is going to start valuing player strength better now that they're looking to change that. Because, yeah, there's plenty of situations where the AI is underestimating you, commits suicide against you. And there's also situations where the AI thinks you're too strong in some cases. There's also that specific problem. The current biggest source of anti-player bias in the game is the threat system. There exists a multiplier that changes the threat player actions generate from 50% to 200% based on AI personality and campaign difficulty level. This causes player threat to scale very differently compared to the AI. The goal of these changes, so they're reducing the threat but changing the strength multiplier. The goal of these changes is to have the AI evaluate the player much closer to how it evaluates other AIs. That's where you get anti-player bias. The addition of a strength multiplier aims to align the way different systems perceive the player, leading to more consistent behavior as well. So it's probably going to, like, it's kind of like, we know the AI is making decisions with respect to the player based on player strength, but they're adding that strength multiplier on top of them. So the addition of a strength multiplier aims to align the way different systems perceive the player. Since the threat system affects a variety of other systems such as task generation, diplomatic attitudes, calculation, deal evaluation, improvements in the AI's behavior in those areas is expected as well. Can we talk about Confederation? It would be nice to talk about Confederation, right? A prime example of an issue these changes aim to resolve is if an AI faction borders a player, it will go into the defensive posture, most of the task of defend regions neighboring threat variety. But factions that are close but not actually bordering the player will aggressively attack the tasks of the attack threat variety. So this actually explains quite a bit. So you have a situation where the AI perceives it's safe in its territory. It doesn't think it needs to defend that territory, even though it may need to defend against other threats, not necessarily you. It attacks you because it thinks, oh, I can attack the player, right? Changing the level of the threat the player generates means that campaign AI will evaluate player action with less bias while retaining the ability to respond appropriately when attacked. Meanwhile, the multiplier should help make the campaign AI aggressiveness scale more closely with the difficulty setting you choose. I'm going to be very blunt on this. I do not believe AI aggressiveness on the campaign map should be decided based on the difficulty. I think AI aggressiveness should be decided based on the resources it has. So if you're playing on easy, of course, the AI has less resources. If you're playing on legendary, the AI has more resources. I genuinely believe that should be a baseline, because you end up in the ridiculous situation where on lower difficulties, the AI is not doing anything or very little and not dealing with you appropriately, and then you have on the higher difficulty where the AI is just flat out suicidal against you, right? Finally, but anyway, they continue. Finally, removing and deprioritizing the campaign AI's preference for attacking human players over AI factions will take the target off your back, unless warranted by your playstyle. That's good, but I think the problem of AI aggressiveness is still something they need to resolve. Like AI is too passive when it doesn't need to. It's too aggressive when it shouldn't be. So I think that is the fundamental aspect. And I do dislike the idea. Like, I understand, giving AI cheats and all kinds of benefits, but when you're literally changing the behavior based on difficulty as opposed to resources and adding more resources, it creates significant balance issues, right? And creates different behaviors. I know a lot of people play on lower campaign difficulties, but I do need to emphasize this. On top of that, I also wish to emphasize one aspect. The AI behavior on the campaign is actually dictated by your battle difficulty. Like, yes, it's based on campaign difficulty as well, but it's also dictated by battle difficulty in a very substantial way. So if you set the battle difficulty lower, you'll see the AI is more passive than if you say higher, where if you say higher, the AI is far more aggressive. Something I feel they should address as well. Like, you can't just ignore the way difficulties work, and I think, like, CA is too attached to the idea of difficulty levels. Like, I understand difficulty levels, but, you know, if there's anything that I think Pharaoh Dynasties did so well is the customization of campaign. That's my perspective. This is scaling. Inside the AI, when tasks are being evaluated before actually being assigned to specific resource for execution, the priority gets modified on how far away the target is from the asset the AI wants to use. The AI's perception of how far away is measured in turns. For existing assets, the calculation takes into account movement extends and more the appropriate usage of stance like tunneling, force march. I guess this explains why the AI is far more willing to attack via the sea than it is to attack via land, because it generally takes less turns, so get via the sea. Of course, I think it's not necessarily calculating that aspect correctly, because sometimes you can't, because there's settlements across the sea that you may not necessarily be able to land and just attack it directly. There's also bugs, glitches on that subject, so it's questionable, a questionable situation. I think there are things that need to be fixed over there. Currently, the time distance scaling is constrained, so tasks have a minimum priority if they take 4 or 5 turns for recruiting and non-recruiting respectively. The intention behind the current setup is to restrict the AI's horizon so it doesn't venture out from its holdings without a very good reason. For a majority of cases, this works fine. I'm not sure I agree with that sentiment, but we noticed several cases where a short horizon does not allow the AI to do certain map traversals with access to tunneling sensor movement. Bonus. One example is the Southlands World Edge-Mountains province. The AI struggles to invade it normally. Yeah. Also the jungle. Also, just like certain areas of the campaign map which will never be attacked by the AI regardless of what you have there or don't have. So what they changed, they changed the current values of minimum 20%, minimum 10% priority, okay, to the new values when the AI has more than 15 regions, minimum of 15% priority at above 6 turns when recruiting, minimum of 15% priority at above 7 turns when not recruiting, new values when AI faction has more than 30 region, minimum of 20%, okay, at 7 and 8 turns. The current setup works well at restraining the AI from breaking up its territory and avoiding cases of province hopping and border gore. This holds true for the early game very consistently, but, and this is the crucial issue of the end game, as turns pass and empires become bigger, it also results in undesirable behavior. 2 types of issues we are aiming to resolve with these changes: certain regions, provinces being inaccessible to some factions with AI, and larger AI empires stagnating and armies recruited in central regions getting stuck there due to borderlands being far away enough so that tasks targeting enemies and around them hit minimum priority. That's good. So that means that the AI is going to be in a situation where it's not so stuck as it was before. Okay. Then there's aggression. We've further tweaked, and I think this is the really important one. We further tweaked how they, like, the previous one is very important for longer campaigns, is a really good one, but there's some other issues on that subject as well. We further tweaked how the AI assesses the strength of rival factions with a strong focus on very hard and journey difficulty. What we changed: average enemy strength and threat modifiers for strategic calculations reduced from 20% to 10%. Very hard legendary modifiers for defensive cowardly factions now allowed to exceed 100%. These changes do not aim to introduce new behaviors, but rather to increase the precision of calculations. Introducing margins of error or modifiers to the raw calculations the AI performs has been a method of introducing difficulty and behavior variety, but both feedback and data show that wider margins disproportionately worsen the gameplay experience. The above-mentioned margin of error is the leading cause of AI factions misjudging their chances and suiciding armies or not leaving enough defenders in threatened territories. So yeah, what I mentioned earlier, that is a significant issue. So hopefully this will be able to help with that situation. I mean, it would be great if the auto resolve was improved. Just mentioning it, CA. These changes should prevent AI from being overly aggressive when it makes no sense to be, resulting in strategically poor decision-making that in turn can result in players fighting one-sided battles that don't make sense in the context of their campaigns and aren't fun to play. Yeah, thank you. You see this line right here, aren't fun to play? You see this? Like, here's what I would tell CA right now. Take this statement, print it, and make sure every single fucking developer in your company has that as their wallpaper or part of their wallpaper. I don't care how cool an idea is in theory. If it's not fucking fun to play, it doesn't belong in the game. Flat out. Like, just literally make it the company motto. Don't make sense. of their campaign are not fun to play. If it's not fun to play, throw it out. It has to be fun to play. It can be challenging, it can be easy, but it should be fun to play. Yeah, this is a subject I do care about. After thousands of hours in Warhammer, you do get tired of seeing the same stuff over and over again and fighting a bunch of these pointless, meaningless, grinding battles. Sieges are key issue, though, with respect to this. And then faction potential. After reviewing data and reading feedback, we have reached the conclusion we need a new category of faction potential for certain minor factions. One of the primary goals of faction potential system is to regulate the strength of individual factions when played by the AI in a dynamic way. This rather direct way of manipulation is very effective, but it also has downsides. The main downside, the more variants we introduce, be it by shifting more faction potential regulation to a random roll or by introducing more categories, the less we can rely on averages. And I believe that the best approach is to continue tweaking faction potentials with subsequent updates, but the goal for the current beta is to establish a baseline we can build on top of. So, all major factions should win their respective theater at least some of the time. Fair enough, minor factions that aren't starting enemies for major factions should have an opportunity to survive at least until the mid-game. I'm gonna flat out ask, what is the equivalent of a mid-game? Because I think this is a crucial point. Like, CA, let me just ask this as bluntly as possible. What do you define as the mid-game? Because it would be good to know, right? Is it 50 turns in? Is it 30 turns? Or is it 20 turns? Like, what exactly is the mid-game? Because I would really like to know that answer. The player should be able to influence the development of factions they've met. Developments under a shroud should have sufficient variance to the point where it's hard to accurately predict the state of theater before scouting it. Lower the faction potential of a few our factions that have been overperforming. Oh, yes. So, Oracles at Siege, Blooded Wanderers, and Cult of Pleasure, and Camry? Okay, so Cult of Pleasure, so Marathi. Fair enough. Skulltaker, I'm not sure I would necessarily consider that as an overperforming faction. Camry, bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes Cetra does dominate, other times he gets squashed. It's kind of 50-50. Siege? Oh yeah. Like, I don't think I've played the campaign in a long time. And very rarely does it happen, mind you. It can happen, but I've rarely played a campaign where Kairos does not dominate at least the part of the world he starts in. So the soft there, Techless always gets wiped out almost all the time. Like, I don't think I've played many campaigns where he survives. The question is how long he survives. It's not a question of whether or not he'll survive. He'll always die. But okay. Increase the faction potential of several underperforming factions. Alright, this is weird. So, Clan Molder. So I'll say this. Some of these things make sense. Other things I'm like, what? Clan Molder, okay, makes sense, especially because of the Kislev rework, so makes sense, right? It was kind of, like sometimes Clan Molder before the Kislev rework would end up winning. Other times after the before the Kislev rework, they would just end up being dominated. It was kind of coin toss. Now, however, they do get crushed. Archeon, I'm not going to agree with that sentiment at all. I think, like, I mean, yes, you have the Kislev rework, and you gotta consider that rework and all that. But I do think right now, we don't necessarily have enough data. But I can tell you, pre-Kislev rework, Archeon was most of the time defeating Boris and winning. And sure, he would not necessarily do all that much beyond that, but many times he would end up winning. So I'm not sure I would say Archeon needs a buff. In quite a few ways. Yes, you can rush him as Boris, but it's not like he's a joke. I mean, there's problems with Chaos factions that are not necessarily, but those are not necessarily related to Archeon. But, you know, post-rework, I guess it makes some sense. Hag Grief? Kinda. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Malice Arcblade should do a lot more, generally speaking. Itza? I'll agree with that. The Bloody Hands? What? Are you joking on that subject? You know, every single patch, every single campaign that I've played since the Greenskin change in Omens of Destruction, I've seen Warzag annihilate the freaking South. So I'm not sure where Creative Assembly is getting this idea from. Like, I understand, you know, I play on Legendary, people play on Normal, but what exactly is going on Normal? Maybe some people will explain to me, but, I mean, maybe he doesn't conquer all of freaking Camry, but I'll be blunt on this. If Warzag is in a situation where the question you're asking is like, is he gonna fucking smash all of Camry? all of the south on his own, or is he going to be stopped by someone? That's now a question of like the Bloody Hands being underperforming. Jeez. I guess we can forget about Grimgor being the ultimate endgame crisis for Eton Legendary and introduce Warzag, the real bringer of the end times. Caravan of Blue Roses and Pits of Mistral and Azak. Yeah, I agree with those. Like, typically speaking, these factions do suffer. So some of these things make perfect sense, but other things, not necessarily so much. So new category faction potential will be applied to minor factions. So all the Ulfwan factions, so Kalador, Eldari, and Safri. Oh, I guess conquering Safri is not going to be so easy anymore for Elariel and Tyrion. Not that it matters. The minor Castor factions, the Varg, basically minor Norscan factions that were basically farm for XP. Dwarven factions, ooh, that's going to be nasty. Imperial Wardens, Jade Custodians, okay. Okay, so why we changed it, that having a variety of minor factions survive and potentially thrive is something that you want to see. We have chosen these minor specific for their gameplay importance in their respective theaters. I think they've just made Village's campaign and Zaytan's campaign just far more fucking annoying, to be quite honest. Other factions make sense, right? You know, Defenders of... But their own faction... Like, Defenders of the Clan are just... Whatever, right? It's just weird to see that specific... But okay, fair enough, you know, Nakai and all that. But yeah, everything else I think makes reasonable sense. Like, I can't complain about this. So I guess the point is, how will these affect you in game? Should be that major factions assert the expected level of control over their theaters, Reichland, over their empire, but without wiping out every minor faction within reach. This should establish a more reliable baseline that keeps more major and minor factions to play longer, allowing players to influence the development of factions that they meet and making a bigger strategic impact. So there will be more degree of unpredictability. Beyond that, Sisters of Twilight will now try and actively pursue a specific item set in the Forge of Dave. The Disciples of Ashut leads them. So, yeah, the Cast Dwarves are actually going to get better units and the Hellforge or better unit upgrades. Vampire Counts will get Bloodlines. Okay. Improved AI handling of the Bloodline mechanic. Very good. Realms of Chaos specific. Yeah. Who cares about, like, Realms of Chaos, basically. But, yeah, some bug fixes with regards to that. So I think there's some really solid changes. I don't think you can't just improve campaign AI without ignoring other issues like auto-resolve sieges and all that. I do think they're on the right path with these kind of changes. I do like what I'm reading. Based on my experiences with the game, I think overall these make sense. I do question some of the, you know, factions they've chosen over here, like buffing Archeon. Big question. Buffing Warzag, it's like, what? Okay. Do you just want to ruin Teclis's campaign even more? I guess that's... and make Camry even more of a nightmare to play a campaign in. It's already pretty unbearable. I'm just pointing it out. Still. Overall, pretty solid set of changes as far as I see it. I think they're on the right path. I'm not sure I agree with necessarily everything. And I certainly don't agree with the idea of campaign AI aggressiveness being tied to difficulty. That would be my only issue with it. But overall, I do think they're moving down the right path. And it is a beta, right? So feedback, all that kind of stuff, it is important. Cosine, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more. And I'll be talking about sieges in the next video.